I don't really have anything funny to say, so here's a clip of Foggy Nelson saying up in our chili.
They're only up in our chili because they're looking for Matt.
In honor of Daredevil Born Again Season 2 premiering the day that I'm filming this video, I thought it would be most appropriate for me to talk about my most personal favorite season of Daredevil, Daredevil Season 3. I have been a fan of the Daredevil TV show for quite some time now, and I credit it with making me a huge fan of Daredevil the character. I started watching Daredevil after the third season was just finishing up, so I kind of got into the game late, but when I tell you, I was immediately sucked into this character and this fan base, and imagine my shock finishing what I thought was one of the greatest seasons of TV, only to find out that Netflix had canceled the show. So I was immediately on board with the Save Daredevil campaign. Honestly, shout out to the Save Daredevil people, because they pretty much are the reason why Daredevil was brought back with the original cast members and the people that we wanted to see brought back, because from the minute the show was canceled on Netflix, they never gave up. I was a petition signer. I've been following the Save Daredevil people on all their accounts for years. And Charlie Cox even credits the Save Daredevil people with his career, saying that they never gave up even when he did. They've also done a lot of great things with their platform, like raising a lot of money for charities. But as much as I was hardcore in the middle of the Save Daredevil fight, when all this news started coming out that Daredevil was in fact returning and becoming a part of the MCU, and it was going to be played by Charlie Cox, and also they're bringing back Vincent D'Onofrio, I was so excited because it's something that I really was hoping would happen, but I never really believed that it's something that would actually happen. So with all that being said, I just think the fact that Daredevil Born Again even exists is something really amazing. And I am holding off on really forming a full opinion about it, because to me, I feel like even though there's a season 1 and 2 of Daredevil Born Again, it feels a lot like one storyline split in half. I'm pretty sure they shot all the episodes at once anyway, and there was a lot of stuff going on within the production of Born Again that kind of gave me a little bit of pause. They had Matt Corman and Chris Ord as head writers and showrunners, and they had filmed 6 episodes before everything shut down. If you remember, there was the Writers Guild strike and also the Screen Actors Guild strike kind of around the same time. And while it was shut down, people from the production, some of the top Marvel execs, and some of the actors of the show, from rumors I heard, including Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, really weren't liking the direction that the show was taking, even though they had already shot 6 episodes. From what I've heard, these episodes more felt like a legal drama than it did like a Daredevil show or a continuation of the show that the fans love so much. So they replaced Corman and Ord with Dario Scardapani, and they brought on a filmmaking duo, Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson, to direct a bunch of the episodes. But they weren't just going to trash 6 episodes that they had already shot, so a lot of Daredevil Born Again Season 1 is a lot of reworking things. I think they reshot the pilot, and I know some of the last couple of episodes were from when the new writers really started to take over, but there's a block of episodes in the middle that they shot a couple of reshoot scenes around. They puzzle pieced together a plot that could use what they had from the first 6 episodes that were already shot. So that's why, even though I kind of had mixed feelings about Daredevil Born Again as a whole, I have much higher hopes for season 2. And I am waiting to form an opinion about the show till I can see a full season with this showrunner and these writers that really kind of took over and change the direction that the show was going to go. Now, enough of that little tangent about Daredevil Born Again, because this video is about Daredevil season 3. The reason why I really like season 3 is because it really feels like the show was firing on all cylinders. It's not just a good Marvel show, it's not just a good superhero show. I think it is, from start to finish, a really good season of TV, and it's one of my favorite seasons of TV. Everybody involved in this show in every department was operating at their highest level. And when you think about it, they had significantly less money doing these earlier seasons than they do now that Daredevil is part of the MCU. All this to say, I wanted to give season 3 its flowers, and honestly, all of the original seasons flowers, because I think they were really able to use creativity to get past some of the obstacles that would arise because of budget limitations. So with all that being said, let's dive deeper into some of the more specific aspects of season 3 and why they are so good. Season 3 of Daredevil is loosely based off of the Born Again run within the comics, which is an arc that came out in 1986 that was written by Frank Miller and drawn by David Mazzucchelli. Eric Olson was the showrunner for this season, while creator Drew Goddard was acting as a consulting producer. John Paisano's original score is still being used throughout these seasons, and let me tell you, one of the best scores on TV, truly. This score absolutely slaps. One of my favorite TV scores. It's one of those I can't even skip the opening credits because I want to listen to the main title theme type of score. The cinematography is one of my favorite things about this particular season of Daredevil, so I want to highlight some of the things that I've noticed within the cinematography that I think just brings the show to the next level, because they really tell the story with the production design, the color choices, and within their lighting and their camera work also. Throughout the series, it seems like Karen and Foggy are often represented by the colors yellow and green. We see them wearing these types of colors often, which I'll talk about the wardrobe in a second, but I like that when they are seen wearing red or within red lighting, it's more of a choice that shows their connection to Matt, Daredevil Red. There's a shot early on in episode 1 where we see Karen within yellow lighting, but when the shot cuts back across to Matt, we see that he is cloaked in red lighting, his signature Daredevil Red. Sticking with Foggy and Karen's yellow and green theme and colors, I like that we see that Foggy's family's shop is yellow and green. There's even an episode where the lights at the shop are yellow and green. We also see throughout this season that the bulletin where Karen works is yellow and green, and Karen's apartment has green cabinets, a green couch, and also green blinds. I like how Foggy and Karen are represented by their own colors throughout the show, throughout the places that they work, throughout their homes, and it really makes it noticeable when you see them in a different color, like the few times that we see them in red. In episode 2, when Matt goes to the dry cleaners, there is this red sign that is lighting him up, and this scene is just before he goes back to that location as Daredevil. And throughout this season, we will not see Matt in his classic Daredevil devil suit. We more so see him in this black outfit, very much similar to early on in season 1. And I like the touch of having bits and pieces of red thrown in so he still feels like Daredevil, or to convey that Daredevil is coming, because before he returns in his black suit to do Daredevil activities, we see red lighting almost as a bit of a foreshadowing. Karen is such an interesting character. I am a Karen girl. I am a Daredevil shipper, which I know is not the popular ship. I know a lot of people would rather Karen be with Frank Castle, and I know there is a big crew of people that ship Matt with Elektra, which is why, on a side note, it's crazy because the official Marvel accounts posted a Daredevil edit just a few days ago, and I'm like, who is running the Marvel accounts, and how can I be your friend? But all this aside, one of the reasons why I really like TV show Karen is because she is written to be a lot like Matt. To me, she kind of feels like the female version of Matt, where Matt has two sides of him, his Matt Murdock side and his Daredevil side. And a lot of times it seems like these sides are at war with each other, as we see sometimes he tries to just be Matt Murdock and he can't do that. And in this season, we see him try to just be Daredevil and leave Matt Murdock behind, and he can't do that. All this to say, I think Karen very similarly has two sides to her. She has this Karen Page more put together side of fighting the bad guys with the power of journalism, much like Matt is fighting evil by day by being a lawyer. And Karen has this other side that comes out sometimes where she gets herself into a dangerous situation, or she drives headfirst into something in order to provoke someone, in order to get the answers she needs, in order to seek justice. She's not afraid to cross that line, much like Daredevil. But I'm saying this because there's a few scenes throughout this season where we see Karen either wearing red or within red lighting, and I think the red lighting is used to foreshadow that Karen is about to have a more Daredevil type of moment. So in episode 4, there's this scene where Karen is witnessing these guys harassing women on the street, and before she goes up to pull a gun on them and to threaten them, which I would see as a more Daredevil side to Karen, we see her in full red lighting. I think this is the first time this happens within the season, and it's helping to show the audience that when Karen is within the red lighting, her actions and motivations are more Daredevil-esque. So we will see that later on in the season when Karen goes to interrogate Jasper Evans. Before she walks in, the building has a single red light, and then when she walks inside the building, she is once again cloaked in red. And to me, when I was first watching the season, I knew something was about to go down, because the last time we saw Karen cloaked in red lighting, she was pointing a gun and threatening people, you know. At the end of the scene, Matt does show up, but Karen is the one who really threatens Jasper Evans to give his statement to the bulletin by saying that she would just lie and print the story anyway, which is, I think, a Karen Page version of a Daredevil sort of threat. And I think the red lighting that we see at the beginning of this scene tips us off to the fact that Karen is acting more along the lines that Matt does while he's Daredevil. Like I said earlier, I like the way that the show slips in red lighting to give Matt a bit of his color back. In the scene where Matt is escaping from the fight with Bullseye at the bulletin, we see these red blinking lights throughout. In the scene where Matt is escaping the prison, we see these red blinking lights throughout. And in the big fight scene with Bullseye at the church, there is a whole lot of red and a whole lot of red lighting to give Matt his color, even though he's not currently wearing his traditional color. Also, talking about that church scene fight with the red lighting, Karen is also involved in that scene, and she's once again doing things in a Daredevil way. She's in the red lighting. She's the one who offers herself up to Bullseye. She's the one who decides she's going to cause a distraction to help get the civilians out. And she's the one who delivers the final blow to Bullseye. And I think it's no coincidence that there's a bunch of red lighting also in this scene while Karen is acting this way. The last thing I want to talk about is another camera movement or a bit of camera work that I think adds so much more to the storytelling of certain scenes. It's when the camera pans behind a person's head over their shoulder to the other side, and they use it a few times throughout season 3 to convey a power shift in a scene, and every time they use it, I think it just adds so much more tension to the scene because subconsciously, as the audience watching, was kind of waiting for what's about to come next. And I think it's so good. For example, in episode 5, there's a confrontation between Karen and Agent Nadeem. And for a lot of the scene, Agent Nadeem has the upper hand. He's questioning Karen about Matt. He also pulls out this picture of Wesley and questions Karen about Wesley. But just before Karen takes back the power in the scene, we see that the camera moves behind Nadeem from one shoulder to the other. And after that shift in perspective, we now see that Karen starts telling Nadeem that Fisk is using the FBI and Fisk is controlling the FBI. Basically, we see the same technique used twice in episode 8 in one of my favorite scenes. Karen is trying to provoke Fisk, but there's a moment where the camera moves behind her head to the other shoulder, and that's when Fisk takes back the power in the scene. Fisk brings up Matt just afterwards and basically lets Karen know that Matt is Daredevil, and he makes Karen think that it's because of her reaction that this information was confirmed. And then later on in the scene, when Karen decides to take back control, bringing up Wesley and talking about how she killed Wesley, we see the same camera movement, but this time over Fisk's shoulders, and Karen is taking back the power in the scene from Fisk as she is about to provoke him by bringing up James Wesley and admitting that she killed James Wesley. And I think this whole scene is so good. There's so much tension in it. And I think the way that the camera moves throughout the scene only adds to the tension, because when we see the camera move behind Karen and shift, we know that Fisk is about to take back control, and it's this moment that puts the audience on edge. And then when we see the camera move behind Fisk, we know Karen is about to take back control, and it just amps everything up even more. There's probably so much more that I can talk about in terms of the cinematography, but let's move on to another aspect of the show. I wanted to talk a little bit about wardrobe. I think wardrobe kind of goes hand in hand with cinematography, as the colors that a lot of the characters wear seem so significant, but the wardrobe department was really doing their best to tell the story of what these characters were going through at whatever certain point in time with the way that they dress, which I think is so cool. For example, Matt wears the black suit throughout the season, but I love the little bits of upgrades that they do to the black suit. In the beginning of the season, Matt is being taken care of by the church that he grew up in, and I love that when we see him first put on his black, I say suit, it's not really a suit, but I'm going to refer to it as a suit. When he puts on his black mask, it's not the usual black mask that we see in season 1, but there's a little strip of white fabric that peeks out under the black mask. And I thought this was such an interesting touch to reference, one, Matt being Catholic, where he grew up, how he grew up within the church as an orphan, but also referencing his mother, who is a nun. At this point in time, Matt didn't know this, but we will come to find out later in the season. I think just putting that bit of white underneath the black mask is a good representation of where Matt comes from. They will add to this later in the season when Matt decides to use the Muay Thai ropes. I believe these are called card chuk, and this is a reference to his dad and growing up with his dad as a boxer, because his dad would sometimes wear these same ropes as he was boxing. So now he has a reference to his mom and a reference to his dad, a reference of growing up around the boxing gym, and a reference of growing up within the church. And I think how his suit represents the different sides of him is done so well within this season. Later on in episode 11, we see that Matt will put on a red shirt as he's back in his iconic color. This is after the whole church fight. I feel like the red shirt symbolizes him going back to his old ways and him changing after a long season of pushing his friends away and saying that he didn't want to be Matt Murdock anymore. And now we're kind of getting this signifier of maybe he's finding that balance like he used to have. And then the red shirt goes underneath the black shirt from the suit, and that's the suit for the ending of the show. So now his black suit has a reference to himself. It's got that bit of Daredevil red, and you can see the red shirt peeking out of the black shirt for the rest of the show. And it's all the different sides of him coming together. And I really like that they told that story within Matt's wardrobe and suit, much like what I talked about with Karen being in red lighting, and it's symbolizing her acting a bit like Daredevil would, or showing her connection to Matt. They show this with Foggy in a similar way with his wardrobe. A lot of the times we see him within the Foggy and Karen colors of green and yellow. Sometimes his suits have that yellow tie. He also wears blue quite a bit, but there's a scene where he puts on a red tie, and I thought that was significant to show his connection to Matt. It's while he's wearing the red tie that he says in this season that he wants to help Matt. He's also wearing the red tie when he gives Nadeem this sort of ultimatum, saying that Matt won't turn himself in until Nadeem comes to listen to Jasper's statement. Very similar to the way that Karen had threatened Jasper earlier and gave him no choice. Foggy is giving Nadeem no choice if he wants to catch Matt. But also while he's in the red tie is that fight scene at the Bulletin, and Foggy gets in a couple of good punches on Bullseye, and I think that it's no coincidence that he is wearing Daredevil red while all these things are happening. Also, in that scene where Karen confronts Fisk, she is not in any type of red lighting or wearing any type of red, which I thought was unusual, because usually when Karen acts in that sort of manner, she has some sort of touch of red. But just after this scene, when Karen decides she has to go on the run because Fisk is probably going to come after her, we see that she puts on a red hoodie. And I think that was the symbolism of she acted like Daredevil in her own way, in the way that she made a rash decision to go provoke a criminal and try to get him to hurt her. Very Matt-like behavior, and we see this represented afterwards. Now she's in a red hoodie, she's in Daredevil colors. And similarly, after the fight scene at the church, when Foggy is called in to help Karen and Matt, we see he's wearing this sweater that has red, and it's one of the few times that we see Foggy wearing red, and I think that's symbolizing his connection to Matt in this moment, because in the very next episode they have that scene with Nadeem where they say they're going to represent him as Nelson and Murdoch, and I think the sweater is a bit of a foreshadowing of Foggy being back on board with Matt and their friendship coming back together. But I just think it's so interesting whenever we see Foggy or Karen wearing red, because it feels so purposeful, because it's not usually the colors that we see them in. And so I really liked that the wardrobe department was working around the clock to make sure that the wardrobe that the characters wore were helping to tell the story. And there's probably a lot more wardrobe things that I didn't mention, or maybe even things that I didn't notice, but I do want to move on. Next, I want to talk about, of course, the stunts and, of course, the one take fight scene. There's a lot of really great fight scenes within Daredevil, and there's a lot of really great ones that happen in season 3 that I love. One thing I liked about Daredevil within its original 3 seasons is that they didn't have a huge budget to do fancy stunt work or to make things look as grand as it does on shows with a much bigger budget. But I love the way that they got creative in order to have some really cool fight scenes. Like, I know this is about season 3, but I just want to give an example of, in season 1, there's this really cool fight scene that happens. The camera is inside of a car rotating around. It's such a great shot and such a great use of creativity, but they do similar things within season 3. For example, in episode 2, there is a scene where Fisk was being transported by the FBI. There's an explosion. These criminals are after him. He's stuck in the car. And then we see Bullseye taking out all of the criminals. Basically, it's our introduction to Bullseye. And most of the action in that scene is happening from Fisk's point of view. inside this van. I thought it was a really creative way to show the action from specifically Fisk's perspective. And of course, we wouldn't be talking about Daredevil season 3 without talking about one of the most iconic one-take scenes on TV, the 11-minute one-take scene in episode 4, No Cuts. One of my favorite one takes of all time. And anyone who knows me knows I love a good one take. I also love a good scene that is made to look like a one take and maybe has hidden cuts in there. But there's something so interesting about a perfectly choreographed one take shot. I love that one in The Bear. I love the Charlie Work episode of It's Always Sunny. There's a really good one in Succession. There's a really good one in Barry. Also, how could I forget Haunting of Hill House? But Daredevil has to be one of my favorite shows that does one takes because it's always happening during a fight scene. And I think that their one takes are even crazier because of the effects that are going on and the stunt work and the choreography. There's just a lot more added within trying to choreograph a one take scene. And also there's stunts, and also there's a stunt performer moving in and out and switching with the main actor. And also there's special effects that have to go off at the right times. It's truly cinema. And this one take within Daredevil season 3 is a true one take. I looked it up. They said that they weren't sure if they were going to get it, so they had a lot of places where they thought they could hide a cut if they needed to, but then they ended up getting it. And I don't know, it's so cool. I've watched this so many times that I can tell when the stunt performer comes in for Charlie, and then when Charlie comes back in to start doing stunts. There's really cool fog effects. There's really cool red lighting going off. There's also like an entire scene with dialogue that takes place in the middle of this scene. It's so good. Truly amazing. Also, like, there's characters getting beat up and stabbed, and they have these blood special effects that have to look good and work on time when they needed it to. All the work that must have went into that scene really paid off because everything was absolutely incredible. I could talk about this scene all day. I love a scene when the hero looks tired because it seems more realistic. And I know he looks tired because he was injected with something, but either way, I think great scene. If you haven't seen Daredevil season 3, I don't know why you would be watching this video, but go just watch that one scene. It's 11 minutes long, no camera cuts. There's a good one in season 2 that involves them going down a stairwell. I don't think that one's a true one take, but it's still a really great scene. And of course, the iconic hallway scene from season 1 was the original. It was the one that got people all amped up. I think the one in season 3 is more than double the length of that original scene, so you could see how they really stepped it up because they knew what the fans wanted to see. And that's Daredevil fighting people in the hallway with no camera cuts. A couple of other really cool fights I want to highlight that take place in this season are the fight with Daredevil and Bullseye at the Bulletin office, because Daredevil is not just simply fighting people on the streets, but I love that in the show and in specifically season 3, we see a lot of really cool locations, one of them being the Bulletin office, and the way there's a lot of places for Matt to get around and hide. There's a lot of places for Bullseye to get around in there. And also it shows you how scary Bullseye is because the way we see him using anything as a weapon really shows you how crazy of a villain and how crazy of a character he is. He's picking up random office supplies and just throwing them, and that is severely injuring and even killing people. And then we see how he ricochets objects off of walls in order to hit his target. It's really one of the first times where it starts to click for the audience that Matt can't fight this guy from afar. He can't let this man find stuff to throw at him. Of course, the fight in the church, I think, is another fight scene with a really interesting setting as they're running around the church. The lighting in that scene I already talked about is phenomenal. It's another cool location for a fight instead of just having Daredevil and Bullseye fight in a back alley somewhere. And Bullseye is using anything as a weapon. He's using rosary beads as a weapon, which is insane. And then finally, I gotta mention the three-way fight at the end, mostly because I think the dynamics of what was going on in that fight scene are so good. Daredevil Dex and Fisk are all fighting each other for different reasons, but no two guys are on the same side. So it's this really interesting three-way fight. And of course, the ending to that scene where we get to see some great acting with Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, I think it's just the cherry on top of the cake, as we got this great action scene and then we let the two really great actors do their thing. And Charlie Cox's whole "I beat you" monologue is just so good every time. And also the symbolism of Wilson Fisk and his white suit and his mostly all white penthouse, and that painting that is very significant throughout the show, the rabbit in the snowstorm, and the significance of him getting beat up in front of the painting and the blood splattering onto the all white painting. It's like poetry, okay? And I absolutely loved it. I will eat it up every time. Finally, I want to touch on the thing that really holds the season together, the writing and the storyline. And I just think that within Daredevil season 3, the story is so tight and so well written that it's what makes the season rewatchable over and over again. I think from start to finish, a lot of characters have these really interesting arcs, and by the end of the season, a lot of these arcs feel very complete, and it ends in a spot where I feel like I got a good ending for a lot of the characters in a way. In episode 1, we get introduced to Agent Nadeem, and the final 10 minutes of the episode follows Nadeem. We get a little bit of his backstory, and then we get a little bit of what he's doing now in the present day and how he's involved with Fisk and the FBI at this point in the story. What would have been something where you're sort of like, who's this guy and why are we spending so much time on him? It's so easy to lock in. Some of that is because the actors are all really great. But I think the pacing of the story and the way that we build up who Agent Nadeem is as a person makes the audience more on board with him to begin with. The show does such a good job with the writing of making you care about the new characters that they're bringing in, including also Maggie, who at the time, because I didn't read the comics, I didn't know Maggie's relationship to Matt. So that was kind of like a revelation to me when that gets revealed later on in the season. She's also a great actress and an interesting character, and I like that we get to see some of her backstory throughout the season. And similarly with Dex, I think he's so important as a villain, so of course we got to set up good backstory, and I like the way that they introduce Dex. We see his skills, we see it seems like he's trying to keep his life on the right track, and then we get a Dex backstory, seeing where he's coming from, and we see how Fisk is able to use what he knows about Dex's mental issues in order to prey on him and to manipulate him into doing stuff for him. It's so good. Because the show is 13 episodes long, I think there's a lot of room to really flesh out these characters. And I think that's really what they did within season 3, and it's why we care about so many of the characters, even Karen, because the bulk of episode 10 is all a flashback where we get to know more of Karen's backstory. I just like getting these backstories of these characters sprinkled in because it makes the audience so much more invested into their present day storylines. And I think it's done in a way where it doesn't really, to me, feel like it interrupts the flow and the pacing of the story. And also, just the main storyline for Matt throughout the season and his arc throughout this season is so good. We really see him start at his most rock bottom, pretty much the lowest of lows, or so it seems at this point in time as the TV show Matt Murdock. And he seems vulnerable and weak, and he's questioning his morals as he usually does throughout the seasons, but this time it feels more serious. Like he's very close to killing himself in the earlier episodes, and he wants to leave his Matt Murdock life behind. He's saying these really moody and dramatic lines, and you're like, man, he is not in a good place. And it's so fun to see him learn that he's got to get help from his friends and lean on his friends eventually. And it's so rewarding when we get to the final episode and we see that he's back to wanting to also be Matt Murdock and back to wanting to be in Karen and Foggy's lives. It's a long, slow burn arc, but it's so satisfying to watch. And I think you really understand who he is, even though sometimes you're like, man, he's being so dramatic, but it's like you get it. You get where he's coming from. I also find Daredevil just such an interesting character in general because he is always struggling with his morals and his faith and being Catholic and being raised in the church and what that means for him as Daredevil and what is actually justice and what is the right way to go about serving justice. And there's always these sort of questions within the show. In season 3, we see Matt start to waver a bit as from jail, Wilson Fisk was continuing to build this criminal empire and he's manipulating everyone and he's bought half the FBI and he's able to still just get everything he wants. He's able to always be one step ahead of Matt and his friends, and Matt is starting to realize maybe I should have killed him. And he becomes really close to actually killing him. I really like that this was a plot line for Matt of him considering this and thinking about this. And it's interesting to see how he comes to his conclusions and how his friends help him to get back to the person who they know him to be. And at the end of the season, it's so refreshing. Like when Foggy says, we're going to represent you as Nelson and Murdock, I want to jump up off my couch and cheer every single time because it's just so good. It's like finally Nelson and Murdock back together again. The show is not the show without Foggy and Karen, but especially Foggy, I think, is the heart of the show and his relationship and friendship to Matt, because I think Foggy always brings Matt back down to reality and he's this grounding force for Matt. And then by the end, we get Nelson, Murdock, and Paige back to their old group and it just feels so satisfying. I also want to touch a little bit on Agent Nadeem again. His arc is so interesting. There's a lot of really great parallels within season 3, and one of them is Agent Nadeem being this sort of parallel to Matt's dad, where they're both fathers who want the best for their families, but then they get mixed up with bad people and in a bad situation. And it is so heartbreaking to see Nadeem's story throughout the season, to see just how Wilson Fisk really got in there and manipulated this situation and basically beat Nadeem down without Nadeem knowing it. And now he must do whatever Fisk says. He does it because he feels like it's the only way that's going to help his family. It's very similar to Matt's dad, because Matt's dad died from being mixed up with the wrong people. And now there's this really great parallel where we see Agent Nadeem call from the phone at Matt's dad's old boxing gym to talk to his son and to explain that he is now turning himself in and he's going to speak out about all the crimes that he was complicit in, helping Fisk do his dirty work. It's very similar to the scene where Matt's dad calls for the last time, saying that he was going to be done working for the criminals that he was working for at the time. It's at the same exact location in the same exact phone, and it's a very similar scene. And I think after hearing this conversation and seeing Nadeem on the phone with his son, Nadeem reminds him so much of his own dad in the way that his own dad was a good guy that got wrapped up with the wrong people, but he had good intentions. Also, speaking of parallels, there's this really great parallel to the comics. Now, I was not a comic reader, but I know there's this iconic scene in the comics where Karen dies and it's Matt holding Karen's body within the church. They're leading us up to this moment of Karen's gonna die, all for this fake out where Father Lantom is the one that actually dies. But at the end of the scene, we see this moment where Karen is holding Matt within the church, and it parallels this direct image from the comic books. It was done so well because everything that they did had so much intention. In a scene like this where they wanted to replicate a popular illustration from the comics is so cool because it's a nod to the people who are a fan of the comics and who would see that and feel like even though the show strays away from the comics, it's its own thing, it's also paying tribute to the original writers that brought this character to life and made so many different stories for these characters. Speaking of Father Lantom's death, I did like the choice to kill off Father Lantom. Father Lantom was an important stake in Matt's character as he represents Matt's inner morals, and there's so many really great scenes where Matt talks to Father Lantom and he kind of bounces these questions that he's having about his morals and about his faith, and Father Lantom is sort of this consistent that's always trying to help Matt see the proper direction to go, although Matt does not always listen to Father Lantom. Father Lantom's death pushed Matt into forgiving Maggie, and it pushed Matt fully back into his old self again. For these kinds of stories, you do need to kill some people off, although I wouldn't say I want somebody like Foggy to die because I think Foggy is the heart of the show, and with Foggy missing, you're missing a lot within the show, but that's a conversation for a different day. But I think Father Lantom is a very interesting character to kill off to see how it will affect Matt in the future now that he no longer has this person who he can really conversate with about his moral and philosophical dilemmas that he's always going through. There's probably a lot more I can mention, but I do want to wrap this video up now. I feel like I was a little all over the place when talking about the story arcs, but I just want to get my point across that the season was really well written because every character had an interesting arc. There was never a moment where I'm watching the show and I'm bored because I want to get to plot A and we're in the C plot of something. Everything felt important and integral to the main point of what was going on, and I think everything tied together so nicely with Foggy's story, with Nadim's story, with Dex's story. All these characters get really great arcs. I love Daredevil because the plot line feels a little bit more grounded and more real, and the characters, they're just well-written characters. In conclusion, Daredevil Season 3 is a masterpiece, and I've said it before and I said it again. I'm so happy that they were able to bring the show back with the original actors. I have some mixed feelings about some stuff that happened in season 1 of Born Again, but I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and wait for season 2 to happen. I really want the show to feel like it used to feel in its Netflix era. I know that's probably not gonna happen, but I hope they at least get some sort of essence of what the Netflix show was, because I think that's why the fans really liked the show and were really mad when the show got canceled, is because the show was so good and they didn't need a big budget to do it. They just had a lot of passionate people working on the show. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you love Daredevil, leave me a comment on your favorite season or your favorite thing about season 3, or what you're most excited for in Daredevil Born Again, or maybe what you're most angry about regarding Daredevil Born Again. And were you a part of the whole Save Daredevil campaign? Were you one of us? If you like this video, make sure to leave me a like, click on my channel and check out some of my other stuff. I do talk about a variety of different things on this channel, so if you like some of those other things, you might want to subscribe to my channel so you always know when I post a new video. But with all that being said, thank you so much for specifically listening to me yap about Daredevil Season 3 today, and I will see you in the next one.